I had just moved into my first apartment alone. A small one-bedroom in a quiet complex. Nothing special. Just a basic place in a decent neighborhood. There were maybe 12 units total, spread across 3 buildings. The first week I was there, I met my next-door neighbor. An older man, probably in his late 50s. He introduced himself as Gary. He seemed friendly enough. Maybe a little too friendly. He asked me a lot of questions. Where I worked. If I lived alone. If I had family nearby. I answered politely, but I remember thinking it was a bit much for a first conversation. Over the next few weeks, I noticed something. Gary was always around. Every time I left my apartment, he seemed to be outside, checking his mail, taking out the trash, just standing on his porch. At first, I thought it was coincidence, but then I started paying attention. I'd look through my peephole before leaving. The hallway would be empty. I'd open my door and step out, and within 30 seconds, his door would open too. One night, around 11, I was watching TV when I heard something outside my door. Not a knock, just a sound, like someone shifting their weight. I muted the TV and listened. Nothing. I got up and looked through the peephole, and I saw him, Gary, just standing in the hallway, a few feet from my door. Not moving, not doing anything, just standing there. I didn't open the door. I just watched him through the peephole. For maybe 2 minutes, he didn't move. Then he slowly turned and went back into his apartment. I barely slept that night. The next morning, I saw him in the parking lot. He waved at me and smiled like nothing had happened. I waved back, but I felt sick. Things got worse after that. I started finding small things out of place. My welcome mat moved slightly. A piece of tape on my door that I'd placed there, broken. Nothing I could prove, but I knew. The breaking point came about a month later. I came home from work early one day. I wasn't feeling well, and as I walked up to my door, I noticed it was unlocked. I always lock my door. I pushed it open slowly, and I saw Gary, standing in the middle of my living room, just standing there, holding one of my shirts. He looked at me, and he didn't panic. He didn't run. He just said, "Oh, you're home early," like it was normal, like he belonged there. I moved out that week. I didn't even finish my lease. I just left. I never found out how he was getting in, but I still think about the way he looked at me, like I was the intruder in my own home. I bought my first house when I was 29, a small 2-bedroom in a quiet suburban neighborhood, the kind of place where nothing ever happens. The house directly across the street had a man living alone. I'd guess he was in his 40s. I never learned his name. He never introduced himself. He just watched. I first noticed it the week I moved in. I was unloading boxes from my car, and I looked up and saw him standing in his front window, just watching me. I waved. He didn't wave back. He just kept watching. This became routine. Every day when I left for work, he was in that window. Every evening when I came home, he was there. Sometimes I'd wake up in the middle of the night and look outside, and I'd see his silhouette in the dark window, still watching. I told myself I was overreacting. Maybe he was just lonely. Maybe he had nothing else to do. Then the mail started coming. The first one was just a blank envelope with no return address. Inside was a single photograph of my car, parked in my driveway. A few days later, another envelope, another photograph. This time it was me, standing in my kitchen, taken through my window. I called the police. They said there wasn't much they could do. No direct threats, no evidence it was him. They suggested I get curtains. I already had curtains. The photographs kept coming. Me getting my mail. Me taking out the trash. Me through my bedroom window at night. I installed cameras. I changed my locks. I stopped going outside after dark. One night, around 2 a.m, my motion sensor went off. I pulled up the camera feed on my phone. And I saw him, standing at the edge of my property. Just standing there, looking at my house. He stood there for 45 minutes. Then he walked back across the street and went inside. The last photograph I received wasn't of me. It was of my bedroom, taken from inside my closet. I sold that house 3 weeks later. I moved across the state. I never found out how he got inside. The police found nothing when they searched his home. No photographs. No evidence. But I know it was him. And sometimes, even now, I'll look out my window at night, just to make sure no one's watching. This last story was submitted by Chris. He says this is the reason he'll never live in a duplex again. A few years ago, I rented the upstairs unit of an old duplex. The kind of house that was built in maybe the 1940s and split into 2 apartments. I had the top floor. A woman lived downstairs. Her name was Margaret. She was maybe 60 years old. She seemed normal at first. Quiet. Kept to herself. The first strange thing I noticed was the floor. There were small holes in certain spots. Not cracks. Holes. Like someone had drilled through from below and then filled them in poorly. You could only see them if you looked closely. I mentioned it to the landlord. He said the house was old, that it probably just needed repairs. I didn't think much of it at the time. Then I started hearing things. At night, when everything was quiet, I'd hear movement below me. Not normal movement. It sounded like someone was directly beneath me, following me from room to room. I'd walk to the kitchen. I'd hear footsteps below going to her kitchen. I'd walk to the bedroom. The footsteps would follow. It was like she was tracking my every step. One night I tested it. I walked in slow, deliberate circles around my living room, and I heard her walking in circles below me, matching my pace exactly. I started to feel like I was being monitored, like every move I made was being recorded somehow. Then I found the first camera. It was hidden in a vent near my bathroom. A tiny lens, barely visible, wired down through the wall. I tore my apartment apart after that. I found 3 more. One in my bedroom, one in my living room, one aimed at my front door, all wired down through the floor to her unit. When the police searched her apartment, they found everything. 4 monitors arranged on a desk, recording equipment stacked on shelves, hard drives full of footage, and notebooks filled with my schedule. When I woke up, when I showered, when I left for work, when I came home, what I ate for dinner. She'd been watching me for months. Every single day. Every single night. But the thing that still haunts me is what they found in her bedroom closet. A stepladder and a hatch cut into her ceiling that led up to the crawl space between our floors. They sent an officer up there with a flashlight. There were blankets, a pillow, empty water bottles, food wrappers. She'd been lying in that crawl space, just a few feet below where I slept every night, pressed against the floorboards, listening to me breathe. I don't know how many nights she spent up there, right beneath me, close enough to hear my heartbeat. I moved out the next day. I didn't take anything that had been in that apartment. I just left it all behind. Sometimes I still wake up in the middle of the night, and I just lie there in the dark, listening to the floor.